I'm going to do is throw this over to Pat to introduce Craig to introduce himself, and we look forward to you talk.
Okay, thank you. If you will stop sharing, Mike, and we'll move to welcome Craig Kennedy, who is our speaker today. There we go. Um, this was sort of serendipity. I had been looking for 2 years for someone to speak on traveling with disabilities. And personally, I hate the term disabilities. I don't know how Craig feels about it, but how about different abilities, challenges, something a little more positive? But anyway, um, it had been a topic identified by our members of three different groups asking, please, is there anyone who can speak to us on the challenges of traveling and how we can alleviate some of the problems? And I was mentioning it to my daughter's father-in-law. How about that? At a dinner,
Dan Horowitz, yeah?
at a dinner one day, yes, Stan Horowitz. And Stan says, well, I know someone who might fit the bill perfectly. And he put me in touch with Craig. So then Craig and I had some communication back and forth, and he agreed. And I was so pleased because I knew that this was an interest. In fact, the host of another group in Bethesda, Chevy Chase, Steve Klitzman, called me just 2 minutes ago and said, please see if you can record this and or put me in touch with Craig because we would like him to speak to our group as well. So anyway, that being said, let me tell you a little bit about Craig. You saw his bio in the invitation, but Craig has been involved in disability travel for 25 years. He is the program coordinator and trainer with an organization called the Open Doors organization, which I'm sure he'll tell us a little more about. He is himself wheelchair bound due to a skiing accident, so has experienced what we face himself personally. And with that intro, I'd like you to go ahead and welcome Craig, who will tell us a little more about his own personal journey. We'll hear his presentation and then take question and answers. Mike is going to mute all of us during the presentation. Please, if you have a question and you don't want to forget it, make sure you add it, put it in the chat, and we can get back to you at the Q&A session. Okay, welcome, Craig.
Thank you very much, Pat. That was a lovely introduction. And for a little more background, Stan is one of my mother and father-in-law's oldest friends. So that's the connection to me. Stan knows my in-laws very well. From
Excellent.
Yeah, so they've known each other a very long time. Anyways, the first thing I want to say is I'm glad you said something about the word disability because I don't know where you guys are at, but my parents, I'm 52. My parents are 80 and 81 years old. And if you say the word disability around them, you know, my dad's got some hearing stuff going on. Both of my parents are experiencing, ironically, some neuropathy in their lower legs. But if you bring up the word disability, you know, this generation doesn't like that word because we're not disabled. We're just getting older. We still want to travel. So however you guys feel about that is fine, but I know this generation really doesn't like that word disability. Personally, I've been in a chair for almost 30 years, so I don't mind the word, and you know I use it when I hear language that is a little outdated. I actually use that opportunity to educate people. So, but I'm glad you said that because my dad, you know, for years, Dad, why don't you get a hearing aid? You know, you're right here, you're losing your hearing. Why don't you get a hearing aid? His said. Well, because my left ear works just fine, Craig. Right. That was his sound reasoning behind not getting a hearing aid, which he has now, both of them. But so yeah, that's interesting. You brought that up about the word disability. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am in a wheelchair, so you'll see me. I like to move around a little bit. You'll see me moving around a little bit, but I'm in my chair now, of course. And I moved to Steamboat Springs, Colorado, when I was 22 years old. And I moved there to be a ski bum with a good buddy of mine. And I had this great job waiting tables up on the mountain. I had to ski to get to work. Fancy restaurant serving, you know, fancy Scandinavian food and bottles of wine to people at lunch. It was a really very cool job because I got to ski to get to work and ski to go home. So at the end of my second season, I was skiing down from work with all my backpack, had this big backpack, really tall one with my shoes and all my gear and my clothes for my next job. So as I'm skiing down the mountain, I turned down a trail that I had never skied before. It was a steep, flat, groomed run, about 38, 40 degrees, pretty steep trail. And when I got to the bottom of it, there was a flat run out and then a road that goes across that you can stop on. And I didn't see it. I was going very fast. It was late in the day, so the shadows had come over the trail. And when I hit that transition, I didn't know it was there. And I launched into the air. And the last thing, ironically, that I remember is kind of this bright orange blur of a slow sign as I launched into the air. And ski patrol was there within a few minutes. And the biggest thing, I guess the biggest thing I remember from that day is waking up, having ski patrol there. And the guy that helped me, ironically, his name was Craig as well. And I have still kept in touch with all of these ski patrollers that helped me that day. I know them all. They asked me 3 questions, right? Do you know who you are? Do you know where you are? And the third question was, can you feel your legs? And I remember that, distinctly. That kind of was the moment that my life really changed, right? It was that question, can you feel your legs? And I remember saying no. And the next week, 6, 7 days is just a blur of hospitals and CAT scans. And then they put me into a morphine-induced coma, put me in an airplane, flew me to Denver. From Denver, I took a Flight for Life helicopter over to Swedish Medical Center. And there I spent, it was 2.5 days in ICU before I stabilized, just enough to go in for 10.5 hours. There was 9.5, 10 hours of surgery to repair 9 broken vertebrae in my thoracic. So I didn't just break 1 or 2. I'm kind of a go big or go home kind of guy. So I guess I went big. And the worst, luckily, was below my belly button, was a T11. T is thoracic, which means chest in the medical world. You have 12 in your chest. T11 was a burst fracture, so the bone exploded, sending shards of bone into my spinal cord, and that's what paralyzed me. So technically, I'm a T12 complete paraplegic. That would be my diagnosis. Complete meaning I don't have any feeling or movement below my injury line. My boss is very different than that. He had a tumor removed from his T4, and he can feel and move parts of his body below his injury line. So that's called an incomplete. But I'm a T12 complete paraplegic. Para just means 2, meaning it only affects my legs. So I will say this: I feel incredibly lucky. This usually sounds funny to people, but I'm very lucky for a guy that broke 9 vertebrae to be where I'm at and have the quality of life that I have. And people ask me all the time if they think that I'll walk again. And, my story to them is that that's not that important to me. What's more important to me is quality of life. And a big part of that quality of life is travel for me. I've always loved to travel. When I met my wife back in I met her in 98. We started dating in 2000. She was actually a travel agent at that time. And she loved to travel and had actually come to Steamboat via Scotland. She had spent a year in Scotland. So it was definitely a good match, and we started traveling together pretty quickly. And we've traveled to a lot of really cool places together. So, but like I said, travel, very important part of my life, outdoors. You may not believe this, but I still ski. I can put up a picture later if you guys want to see a picture, but I am a sit skier now. I actually took a break from my current job from 2010 to 2016 to help start and grow and run the adaptive sports program in Steamboat. So winter and summer skiing, hiking, fishing, worked with injured vets, adults and kids with disabilities. So I took a little break in there and then went back to the accessibility stuff. But I love to travel and any kind of outdoor activity, sports. Actually, I'm going to show you some pictures here in a sec, so I'll save that. But that's my story. And other thing I'll tell you guys is ask me anything you want. This is a really good opportunity to ask. If you always had a question you want to know what happens if you're in a wheelchair, I'm the guy you can ask, and I'm very difficult to offend. So I'll just put that out there. And if you guys have questions at the end, I'm willing to answer pretty much anything. And I've had people ask me some very personal questions. So But I'm an open book. That's good for education. And as far as travel, I have a very unique perspective. Let me go ahead and put presentation up here.
While he's getting that up, let me remind you that we're not taking questions during the presentation. Please either type them into the chat or hold them until we open the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Whoops. So, and these are just some cool pictures of different places. And obviously, I'm guessing that you guys are here, so you guys like to travel, or maybe haven't traveled in a while, and you're interested in getting back into it. So, I will tell you, I'm very passionate about traveling. The reason that I do this job and the reason I love my job so much is not just the fact that I get to educate and the fact that I get paid to travel, which I love, is that you can go anywhere in the world now in 24 hours. And I truly believe that everybody should have that opportunity, no matter what your ability level. So that's a big reason I do what I do. And I have a very unique perspective because I have traveled all over the world, and I've flown almost 500,000 miles since I've been in a wheelchair. I actually only flew once before I was injured when I was 21 years old. My first summer I was in Colorado. I flew back home for Thanksgiving, I think it was, or Christmas. I don't remember which. But so yeah, a very unique perspective. I've traveled in a lot of different ways. I've been on boats. I've traveled on Amtrak to different parts of the country, a couple of overnights. I've been on a cruise ship. I've been on plenty of airplanes, taxis, buses, you name it. I've probably done it. That's truly what I love. These are just some pictures of some things that I've done. ATV, that was up in Alaska, visiting some friends of ours. The boxing thing was interesting. Wheelchair boxing, I took a few classes with a buddy of mine actually in Fort Collins, Colorado. But that was a lot of fun. Really good exercise. Really good exercise. My wife and I actually each bought gloves. We thought this would be a good idea, for some exercise, but I don't think it's a good idea to be boxing with your wife, especially when she's tougher than you. Yeah, she just said, I appreciate that in the background. She heard me say that. So on the right there, that's me hand cycling. I used to do a lot of hand cycling when I was in Colorado. I'd go, usually 800 to 1,000 miles a summer. I'd go out on my bike for anywhere from 10 to 20 miles at a time, riding roads and back roads. It's a great way to get out of your wheelchair. What you'll notice in a lot of these things that I do is any chance I get to get out of my wheelchair and leave that behind, that's like anonymity. People don't know, right? So that's why I like driving and road trips so much. So hand cycling on the left bottom, that was early on in my injury in Crested Butte, Colorado. I went downhill mountain biking. So there's no pedaling on this bike. It's strictly for downhill and for speed, but it's got full suspension. And the first thing they had me do was ride down the stairs just to prove that it could handle it. So, and then my passion, still skiing. That's me skiing there in the bottom, in the middle. It's still my favorite thing to do. In fact, I live in Northeast Tennessee now, but I go back to Colorado for 2 months every winter. January and February, I live with a friend, and I ski and I travel and work out of there. And my wife comes and visits a couple times, and we see each other somewhere warm usually because I travel all the time. And then on the right, it's a really good picture. I love rock climbing too. This is actually a picture just doing straight pull-ups up this artificial rock wall with my wheelchair still attached to me. So this is the kind of person I am. I'm not crazy, but I do some things that may be perceived as crazy sometimes, but I'm not really that crazy. But I do love to have fun. I love adrenaline. I love going fast. And I love actually just trying anything that people tell me I can't do anymore. That's a big one for me as well. So let's talk about travel a little bit. You guys know plenty about me. So one of the most popular things to do is cruising as you get older. What I love about cruising is that everything's in one place. You don't have to unpack and go to a new hotel room every time you go somewhere, right? You just get off, you leave your stuff on the ship. And what's really popular now, first of all, cruising 20 years ago realized that they had a population of older travelers, and they began to make their ships a lot more accessible. So they were the first kind of travel industry to really embrace the disability community and say, you know what, we're going to take care of these people. Instead of having 2 or 3 accessible rooms on the boat, we're going to have 30 or 40, right? So they are really good, really accessible. And the craze nowadays are these river cruises, right? So my in-laws, same age as my parents, 80 and 81, they actually just got back from a river cruise. I think Viking Cruises is one of the ones that they really like. They just got back from a cruise of the Great Lakes, and they loved it. They've been on a bunch of cruises, and this was, I think, sounded like their favorite. So they spent almost 3 weeks on a small boat with only 150 people, right? So it's a much smaller feel. You're not in this big floating city. And they actually went with other friends, from their live in a retirement community in Sarasota, Florida. So there were 8 couples, I believe, from that community that went. So they got to be with their friends, small setting, easy on and off the boat, and very accessible from what I can tell. So that's really very popular these days, is the river cruises. They've been on a Baltic cruise. They did the Amazon River. What was the other one? Oh, they went around Italy, and then the next one they're planning is actually the east coast of the United States. The intercoastal waterways. They're going to, I think, in December they're doing an intercoastal trip from north to south, ending down somewhere around South Carolina or Florida. I can't remember, but really popular, and there's a lot of new kinds of cruises out there. So I'd encourage you guys to look into that for sure. As far as air travel, this is really, definitely my specialty. I've flown more than I've done anything else, and I do it for work, right? So as a job, I train disability experts for the airports and airlines all over the world. I've been as far away as Dubai, speaking at conferences. We do advocacy. We write training programs for airlines and different things. And then I also act as legal counsel for about 6 different airlines. Right. Airlines, something I want to, after I talk about something, I'll explain to you guys is the way the laws work, because there's a different law when you're on an airplane. So there's some pictures on the screen here in front of you, and these are some of the more popular items that people are using for travel now. They're kind of travel assist type devices. So on the top left, that's called a smart drive. And that is just a powerful motor with a couple wheels on it. If you're a wheelchair user, right, this is something that will help save your arms, and insurance is paying for these now, because these, at the price of $6,000 or $7,000, are cheaper than shoulder surgery, right? So insurance is Medicaid it's Medicaid approved, which means pretty much all the other insurance carriers will approve it because Medicaid approved it. So it's easy to carry, it's portable, it's fairly light, comes with extra batteries, and it just hooks onto the back axle of your wheelchair, and then you can control it with your watch or the little joystick, and it basically motorizes your manual wheelchair, right? On the top right is a little bit different form. That's a similar wheelchair to what I'm in, except I've got mountain bike tires on mine. The hub in the middle of the wheel is called a smart hub, or not smart drive, a smart hub or a smart wheel. And inside that is a mechanism that creates and stores kinetic energy. So it's a power assist. So if you are pushing your chair and your arms are a little weaker, then it makes you feel stronger, right? As you're rolling, it's creating energy within that hub, and as you push, it pushes you twice as hard as what you're actually pushing. So it makes you a stronger person, basically. The scooter in the middle, this is one in a long line of new lightweight, portable, foldable scooters. This is my father-in-law's scooter. The lithium-ion batteries are in the floor panel, so you don't even see them. And to the right of the picture, you'll notice this actually folds up, and you can roll it like a roller bag, just like a carry-on bag. It weighs about 70 pounds. All right. So really lightweight, easy to get around scooter that's not quite a wheelchair if you don't need a full wheelchair. On the bottom right is a power transport chair. Basically, it's a portable power wheelchair, right? So if you need one step further than the scooter, because you can't walk as much, then we would use this lightweight wheelchair. and for a lot of people, what a lot of people do that are in regular power wheelchairs, they buy one of these at Costco for $4,000 or $5,000 because it folds up and fits in the trunk of your rental car. Right? If you normally travel with a 300-pound power wheelchair, you know that it's difficult to find a van that you can rent in the city that you're going to, and if you can find it, it's going to be 4 times as expensive as a regular rental car is. So these lightweight wheelchairs are powered by lithium-ion batteries, and they weigh more like 30 or 40 pounds instead of 300 or 400 pounds, and they're a lot less expensive. So if they get damaged, they're easier to fix as well. And then on the left, if you have a manual wheelchair that you use and you like to go fast, I don't have one of these yet. This is at the top of my wish list. This one is particularly called a Firefly, but there's a lot of different brands out there of this similar thing. You attach some hardware to the front of your manual chair to the frame, and then it clicks in to that hardware, raises your front wheels off the ground about 2 inches, and then it turns your manual wheelchair into a moped, basically. And they go 18, 19 miles an hour, and they'll last, for 20 or 30 miles. So these are just a few of the kind of newer things, lightweight, affordable things that are more like a travel aid for people, right? Rather than having to have maybe a full wheelchair. But these are more your lightweight options. A couple other things I wanted to briefly touch on. Travelers Aid is an international nonprofit organization, and they actually help with anybody, right? So I'll give you an example. I needed a tube. I got a flat tire where I was flying through Chicago, home from Seattle. I was going to be in Chicago for 4 hours. So our office is in Chicago. So I had one of our employees go buy me a tube for my tire, drop it off at the airport at the Travelers Aid desk. They took it through security to their desk inside security, and I didn't even have to leave the airport. I went right to their desk, picked up my tube, and I have the stuff to change it, and I changed it right there in the airport. But they are a really good resource if you're ever traveling and you need something and you can't figure out, or you're a little bit desperate. Travelers Aid is a wonderful resource, and they are in, maybe Google them when we're done here, but they're in a lot of countries. They're a very big organization, and they're super helpful, especially for folks with disabilities or, older travelers that maybe I'm not disabled, but I might need a little extra help with something. So that's Travelers Aid, really good resource to have. And then wheelchair assistance at the airport. So I will tell you guys right now, and you may already know this, depending on how much you travel, airports can make you feel more disabled than you are. Right? You may not use a wheelchair or a scooter or a rollator. A rollator is the walker with wheels on it and brakes. You guys, I'm sure maybe somebody uses one of those. So the wheelchair assistance at the airport is really designed for people that need assistance while you're at the airport. So again, you may not use one of these in everyday life, but you get to an airport and the walk from security to your gate might be a half a mile, depending on the size of the airport and the city that you're in. And that's difficult to navigate for a lot of people, even if you're not an older traveler. And if you don't have a little bit of neuropathy in your legs, it's not easy to navigate anyways. So the airlines legally have to have a service company that provides wheelchair pushing or assistance, right? If you're blind or you have low vision, could be as simple as just an escort, right? They want to take your arm and have you lead them through security into the gate. If you're in a wheelchair or you're an older traveler and you can't handle the big environment and your bags and everything else, you sign up for wheelchair service and they will put you in a chair. They'll help you with your bags and they'll get you to your gate, right? And legally, they have to provide this. Now, I'm going to recommend to you guys, give them as much information as you can about what you need, right? And be honest with them and tell them as much about yourself as you can, because then they'll be prepared for you and they'll know exactly what you need. So highly recommend the wheelchair assistance at the airport. All you need to do is let the airline know when you book the ticket that you're going to need wheelchair assistance. And sometimes it's to and from the gate. Personally, I don't take it to and from the gate. I wheel to the gate myself, right? Because I'm a fiercely independent person. But once I get to the gate, once I get to the door of the airplane, I have to have help to get on, right? So I have to tell them that I need help ahead of time. Then they send two people. They put me in a straight, it's called an aisle chair, right? They strap me in and then they wheel me to my seat and I transfer into my seat. But even if you're a full quadriplegic, they will help you get into your seat, right? They are trained in lift and transfers and everything else. So really good service to use. And now I do want to tell you a little bit more about the law because I didn't actually do that. So there are two laws when you're traveling by air, right? One is the ADA, and that covers the airport. Two is the ACAA, the Air Carrier Access Act, right? Also known as Part 382 of the Code of Federal Regulations, right? Biggest two, here's the big difference. The ADA is the physical environment, and that's the Department of Justice Office of Civil Rights, right? So if I go into the airport and none of the bathrooms are accessible, I have the right as an individual to sue the airport and make them have accessible bathrooms, right? If I'm on the airplane and I get off the airplane and my wheelchair is broken, that is a clear violation of the Air Carrier Access Act, but I don't have the right to individual action against the airline, right? I can complain to the DOT and they may or may not fine the airline, right? And there's a good reason for that. If we allowed individuals to sue an airline every time their rights were violated or a chair was delayed or lost or broken, we would have millions of lawsuits on our hands and we wouldn't be able to operate our business. So that's the way it has to work. But that's really the big difference. Once you get onto the airplane, you're covered under the Air Carrier Access Act. And the most important three letters that I'm going to teach you today are CRO. Write that one down. That's a complaint resolution official. And under the Air Carrier Access Act, the airline has to have them available during all hours of operation. And they are the experts in the Air Carrier Access Act. I train those people. I'm a CRO myself. And we make legal decisions for the airline. So if my rights are violated, I want to talk to a CRO right away. Or if I want to get on the airplane and I want to take my foldable wheelchair on the airplane instead of underneath, you guys may not know this, but they have to let you put it on the plane. Any airplane with 100 seats or more under the DOT regulations, if it has a closet, has to have a little sign on the closet that says for priority stowage of mobility equipment. And even if the crew already has their luggage in there, you can ask them to remove their luggage so that you can put your mobility device in the airplane. I'll tell you why, because up here in the cabin, 0% damage. Underneath, 100% damage. That's where all the damages happen. So anything that's non-powered or will fit in the overhead or in the airplane, I would encourage you guys to bring that stuff with you. Seat cushions, joysticks. I actually take the wheels off of my wheelchair and I bring those on board because I had a couple of bad experiences a long time ago with a broken wheelchair. And ever since I learned to do that, bring it on board, right? And if for some reason they say, no, we can't put it in the closet, that's when you use those three letters. I need to talk to a CRO, please. And they will come and tell the crew what the law says. There's really only one answer. When you ask to put your stuff in the closet, it should be yes, absolutely, because that's actually what the law says. So a couple good little tidbits about air travel for you guys there. And I have, like I said, a wealth of knowledge on travel, and I will put this out to you guys. If you guys are going on a trip, I'll give you my information, and you are welcome to contact me anytime. If you have a question or a need, or you're going somewhere and you're not sure how to handle it, I am happy to help you guys out anytime. All right, I'll just put that out there. I'll be your free travel agent. Well, I won't book your travel for you, but I'll help you be better at booking your own travel and ask the right questions and things like that. So air travel, more and more popular, and there's more people with disabilities flying than ever. The numbers are staggering. So some accessible cities. All right. In the U.S., the most accessible city in the U.S. is probably Las Vegas. Similar to the cruise ship industry, they realized a long time ago that they have a high percentage of older travelers that come to Las Vegas, and they needed to be accessible. So Las Vegas, very, very accessible place. I was just there about a month ago to see a concert at the new Sphere venue. I don't know if you guys have seen that advertised, the Sphere. It's a very cool, modern digital masterpiece. You guys will have to look it up. Very cool place. But some of the other big cities in the U.S. that stand out: Orlando, Denver, Washington, D.C., And I've been to all these places many times. Wonderfully accessible cities. Typically, the closer you are to a big city, the better the access. I will tell you guys that right now. The further away you go out into the more rural part of wherever you are, there tends to be a little bit less access because less people care or complain about it, and then there's less of a concentration of people with disabilities out there because they know if they live near a city or in a city that they have access to everything they need, medical, doctors, hospitals, and for a lot of people that's just simpler. Me, I decided to move out into the middle of nowhere. And I don't know if you guys can tell here, but by the background, but I live in a yurt. I don't know if you guys know what a yurt is. It's a round Mongolian style tent. My wife and I bought 40 acres of land, put a huge deck, two yurts, a 30 foot and a 20-foot yurt, and then we connected it with a bathhouse. So we live off the grid as well. So I decided to move way out into the country. So some other good international destinations. And I will start by saying that the Paralympics are going on right now, right? They always happen 2 weeks after the Olympics. And any city that the Olympics have been to, the Paralympics have been there also, which means before Paralympians showed up, the city spent millions of dollars to become more accessible, improve their public transportation and their services, and whatever it might be, and overall access, curb cuts on street corners. They spend millions of dollars in any of these cities. Rome, Italy is a good example. The Olympics was there years ago, and now because of that, there's an elevator in the Parthenon, which you would never have gone up. It's on the outside, and they figured it out, how not to ruin the structure. But wherever the Olympics and Paralympics have been, you're going to have a little bit better access, which is why I put Paris up here. Obviously, they're in Paris right now. I actually have some friends competing in the Paralympics. So really fun stuff to watch. But, again, the bigger the city, Tokyo, Sydney, Rome, Dublin. I've been to Dublin. That was a very cool place and quite accessible. I've also found, I'll give you guys a little tip. I've also found outside of the U.S., in the U.S., sometimes people seem put out when you need access. They're like, oh man, I got to become more accessible. It seems like almost like a pain in the butt to them. In other countries, they will bend over backwards to help you. If you ask for help, they will help you. That's amazing how compassionate people are in foreign countries. So I love traveling to foreign countries. I especially love Europe because a lot of people speak English. Right. And it's easy to get around on public transportation and the trains. I remember taking the speed train from Brussels to Paris years ago with my wife, and it was just a great experience. And if you have a disability, little tip, they put you in first class on the trains over there because they have the most space there. So you kind of get a little bit of a free upgrade when you're on the trains in Europe because that's just how they treat their passengers in wheelchairs. So what else? Amtrak, I am intimately involved with Amtrak as well. We've been working with them off and on since 2011. And, for the last 3.5 years, I've been helping to manage all the trainers and the trainings. And we've been doing 50 to 60 trainings in 18, 20 different cities every single month for the last 3.5 years. So I've spent a lot of time. I know everything from their policy and procedures book, how they treat people with disabilities. I know all the stuff that happens on Amtrak, crazy stories, things that have happened. But what I love about Amtrak, you're not in an airplane, right? You can move around. You see things from a train that you don't see from the road and that you don't see from an airplane. An airplane, you're just flying above the clouds. You don't get to see what's below you most of the time, or not that close. And the pace. It's a slower pace. So if you don't want to be, going as fast and crazy, it takes several days to get across the country on a train, but you can go from coast to coast on a train. I've taken the auto train from DC to Florida. All right. And that one's cool because there's not a lot of stopping. That's a direct train. They only stop in Columbia, South Carolina, and then at Sanford, Florida, which is just north of Orlando, where it drops off. And then the other two, let's see, Chicago to LA and Chicago to New York, both beautiful trips. There is a very cool one that goes all the way to the West Coast through the Rocky Mountains. It's called the Zephyr, and it lands in Sacramento or San Francisco. I can't remember, but that's the one that is at the top of my list. I really, really want to do that one. So Amtrak is really wonderful, and I've seen firsthand the improvements. They are sinking hundreds of millions of dollars into their access. They're going to have trains eventually that have elevators, lifts in them, so you'll be able to go up to the viewing car. They'll have bigger bathrooms, wider aisles. So the trains of the future are much more accessible than what we have right now, and they're already starting to roll those trains out. So we're seeing a lot of improvement also in their platforms, ramps, accessibility, and in the stations as well. So hearing loops for people who are hard of hearing and have a hearing aid. There's going to be digital readouts on the trains eventually. So I'm a huge Amtrak fan. I love it. I want to say it's similar or a little bit cheaper than flying. But it is really a fun experience, and they have rooms and roomettes and different ways that you can travel. But I really like the train. Would encourage you guys to check out Amtrak, and really, really nice people. That is what Amtrak is known for, their customer service, and they are just wonderful people. So love that. And then one more hint here on this screen about hotels, chain hotels, Marriott, Hilton, IHG, Holiday Inn, right? The big names. They're going to be your most accessible hotels, especially as you get outside of the U.S., right? We have disability legislation here. There is disability legislation in Europe, and some places in South America, Australia. Not everybody in the world has disability legislation like we do with the ADA. There is the National Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities that 165 countries have signed. But how many of those countries have actually, put that into action? I'm not sure. So as you get outside the U.S., it's definitely important to know, what you're getting into, which I'll talk about in a sec. Real quick on here, unique experiences. Airbnb is very popular these days. You can stay in a castle. You can stay in a yurt. You can stay in a tree house. In fact, for our anniversary in a couple of weeks, we're going down to Southeast Tennessee, to Pigeon Forge. And we are staying in a wheelchair accessible treehouse campground. Sounds very interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. Right? It's obviously there's a ramp going across to the entrance, so I'm very excited to see that. But there are so many unique experiences on Airbnb. Again, I would make sure you know where you're going, know what you're doing, and ask the right questions. But a lot of cool stuff there. Road trips. If you guys like to drive, I love to drive. I also have friends in power wheelchairs that would rather drive than fly because they've had their chair broken once or twice, so they would rather actually drive across the country. But what was popular, 10 years ago, was this one tank of gas trip, right? So maybe you have just a couple of days, and how far and back can you get on just one tank of gas? Just something unique. It's affordable. Wherever you want, you can drive, so you've got all your stuff with you, right? You don't have to worry about the size of your carry-on or the size of your luggage and how much it weighs, and you can bring whatever you want when you're in the car, right? And then skip gen travel. This is definitely a newer thing, and I don't know if you guys have ever traveled with any of your grandkids, but grandparents and grandkids are now getting together and traveling together, which is wonderful. Right, so the grandkids can learn from the grandparents, and the grandparents, if they need a little extra help, they've got a strong young kid there, to help them out. So those are just a couple of the unique things that I came across when I was doing some searching. And then this is maybe the most important part. When you're traveling and you have a disability, you have to advocate for yourself. You need to know your rights, right? If you're flying, you need to know about the Air Carrier Access Act and the CRO, right? If you have an issue. If you're traveling, you need to know your rights. You need to be able to take care of yourself, because what you expect to be accessible may not be up to your expectations of accessible, right? Everybody's got their own definition of what handicap accessible or wheelchair accessible means, right? And it's open to interpretation. So the more you do for yourself, I recommend when you're going somewhere, I recommend emails, phone calls, and not just, hey, are you accessible? Could you measure the doorway for me? Right? Because early on in our travel, we booked some stuff, and yeah, we're accessible. Don't worry. And they sent us pictures and stuff. I was like, oh, this looks accessible. And I get there and it wasn't accessible, right? All the little things that you don't see in person, but they thought it was accessible, but it really wasn't, right? So I would encourage you to make phone calls, send emails, ask detailed questions, lots of questions, get measurements of doorways if you need to. And again, share your information with them. When you travel, it's important for people to know exactly what you need. If you show up at the airport and ask for help, you're not going to get as good a help as if you call the airline ahead of time and set up an appointment, and then they will be expecting you, right? Give them as much information as you can. It will help your travel, make your travel a lot easier. Bring extra stuff, especially if you're on the train or on an airplane. Trains get delayed all the time, and so do airplanes, right? And I just came back from vacation. I got stuck in Charlotte, North Carolina overnight. We were supposed to board at 9:30 p.m. We finally boarded at 1:30 a.m. And then they told us they had a problem with the flaps. By the time they got the flaps fixed, the captain had timed out and we couldn't fly. So from 4 to 7 a.m., I slept in the airport, right? But I had 2 extra days of supplies with me, so I wasn't worried, right? For me, it's bathroom supplies, catheters, that kind of stuff, gloves. But if you have medications, all right, you want to make sure you have at least 2 or 3 days extra, just in case there's any delays. All right. As far as other countries, I touched on this a little bit. The U.S., we have the ADA and the Air Carrier Access Act, and there are DOT regulations covering train travel and bus travel and everything else as well. But in other countries, they may not have the same laws that we do, right? So again, what you might think you're going to expect over there might be different. So I would still send emails and ask lots of questions, but be prepared for, not having exactly what you need, right? Every once in a while, that's going to happen because the laws are different in other countries. Where we have these expectations in the U.S., other countries, they may not have that. Tour companies. So, with cruising, one of the issues that we find, depending on where you're cruising to, the boat is accessible, but the port city isn't. All right. So if you're going to go on a cruise, make sure you know ahead of time, is that port city accessible? Right. And do they have a means to get off of the boat that's accessible and back on? Because that is super important. And then tour companies, once you get off, the boat will offer all these different tours, right? But are the tour companies used to having people with disabilities or older travelers, and are they open to that? When we travel, I might have to talk to 5 or 6 different companies that do the same thing to find one of the 5 that is actually willing to try it, right? Because maybe they've never taken a person in a wheelchair before. And I say, no, I'm not your average wheelchair user. I'm very strong and get in out of my chair. And they'll say, okay, we'll try it. So you may have to talk to multiple people before you decide on which tour you're going to do. But that portable, foldable wheelchair and scooter that I showed you earlier, those come in handy when you get somewhere and all of a sudden it's a longer walk than you thought, or it's steeper than you thought, and you have your scooter, right? You're already prepared. So again, be ready to manage any accessibility issues you might have, and manage your expectations too, because you might not get exactly what you expected, even though you called, emailed, talked to people. There still might be a couple little things that that happen. So just be on the lookout for that. And then finally, I wanted to share some resources with you. These are kind of the top 4 disability travel agencies that I'm familiar with in this country. Wheel the World is a young guy in a wheelchair and his brother. They're from Brazil. And they started this with the idea that they wanted this to be the Travelocity of disability travel, right? So it's a search engine, and it's a really good one. And everything that they recommend on their site is wheelchair accessible because the owner is a wheelchair user, right? So typically in my world, if it's wheelchair accessible, it's accessible to almost everything else, to almost everybody else. Right, because the wheelchair is the toughest thing to get around in typically. So if it's wheelchair accessible, it should mostly be accessible for everybody else. So Wheel the World, Easy Access Travel, Wheelchair Escapes, and then Sage Traveling. That's my friend John Sage. He's also a wheelchair user. He's come on the scene in the last 10 years and is doing great things as well. And then, if you get onto our old friend Google and you just Google the words disability travel agency, they'll give you lots and lots of stuff, right? It doesn't have to come from me. There's a lot of information out there on the web nowadays. And honestly, more people with disabilities use the web more than people without disabilities. We learned that from a study that we did, because technology is equalizing when you have a disability, right? So those would be our specialists. And then that's all I have for now. And I would open it up to whatever questions you guys might have. And I hope that was what you're looking for. If there's anything missing, I'm happy to add it right now.
That was terrific, Craig. Thank you so much. I'm
Yep.
going to open it up for questions. Mike, if you could make sure everyone's unmuted, or Bill. And I saw that Pat Caston has been had her hand up for a while, so we'll perhaps start with Pat.
Oh, wow, look at all these people that came in. We're packed. We got a full house.
Yes,
Craig, that was
Love
a
it.
fabulous speech you gave. Great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right, questions.
Pat Caston, you had your hand up?
Just unmute.
Yeah, she has. Can you unmute everyone?
I can't. They have to unmute.
Okay, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know how my hand got up, but I don't have
You don't.
any questions,
Okay, fine.
except to thank you for the talk.
Okay, and so that's a nice thank you to Craig. I'm sure everyone feels that. I know some people must have questions, so if you'll raise your hand, we'll identify you.
Okay, you can raise your hand or you can go in the chat.
I have a
Ed, I see your
question.
hand up. Go ahead,
I have
you
a
have to
question.
unmute.
Well, Craig has a question first.
I have a question for you guys. Let me see hands. Is anybody traveling in the next 6 months? Anybody got any trips planned? Oh yeah, I would love to hear about where you're going.
Okay. I see Gordon Hay, I think, has your hand up. Gordon? You have to unmute. Everyone has to unmute themselves at this point.
Well, Pat, I called on Ed. Ed, you need to unmute.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I think I'm good now. I think
You can follow.
I was a skier. I learned to snowboard in my late 50s. But, the things you've done, there's only one of you in this entire country. You are really unbelievably amazing.
There's a few of me. Believe it or not, there's people crazier than I am.
So I use hiking sticks, REI hiking
Yep.
sticks, sometimes just one, sometimes two. Am I going to have any problems with those on the plane?
No, those are considered mobility aids, and they cannot take those away from you. Those will fit right through the scanner. So they'll run those through the scanner. They'll meet you on the other side. You shouldn't have any problem with those. Nope. In fact, my father-in-law uses the same exact sticks.
Okay. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay, Ed, you're up, and then Judy next. Ed, go ahead.
Yeah, Craig, I got a quick question. We're doing a cruise in March. I'm not wheelchaired, okay, but I do have walking disabilities. Do the cruise ship companies themselves know which ports are more accessible, where they'll give you a ride from the ship, let's say, in beyond the area where you're checked for security?
You can ask them. In my experience, you're better off finding out on your own. Look at their list of what's accessible. Send them an email and say, hey, what is accessible? I have some walking things, and just let them know and see what they say. And if they are not sure, or you don't get the information you need, then I would directly contact the tour companies. The other thing that you may find, I don't know if you're familiar with Scootaround. A lot of the cruise companies use Scootaround, and you can actually rent a scooter from them when you arrive at the ship, so that you have a scooter to get around the ship on as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Judy, you're up.
Is there any organization or any help with cruises or other travel for people who, besides movement disabilities, have very severe strange food allergies?
Well, interesting. So that would be something that you'd need to bring up with the ship. But like I said, cruise ships, and not just cruise ships nowadays, a lot of people are off of the standard American diet these days, right? Standard American diet is what most people, is probably what guys grew up on. It's what I grew up on. But there are a lot of diets outside of that these days. And the cruise ships are pretty good at making sure that you have options, right? My wife, at different times has been vegan, dairy free, gluten free, right? All these different things. We went on a cruise to Jamaica just under 2 years ago, and with Royal Caribbean, and I think the food was actually the most impressive part of the whole trip. And they had tons of stuff that she could eat.
Yeah,
So,
my food allergy is not that simple as to fit in
is
any
it
of
is
those.
it nuts or what are we talking about? Do you mind sharing?
You know what systemic nickel allergy syndrome is?
I don't.
I can't even eat anything that has been cooked or stored in stainless steel.
Oh,
I
interesting.
am insanely allergic to nickel.
Interesting. Yeah, you would.
And
I would almost
also,
think.
three-quarters of all the food in the world has nickel in it.
Yeah, no, that's an odd one. I've not heard of that one for sure. I learn something new every day, though, in this world. That's for sure. In that case, if it were me, I would want to make sure that I could bring some of my own food or contact them ahead of time and just let them know exactly what you have going on and see if they can accommodate you or not. You might be surprised. You might be surprised. The cruise ships are really wonderful with people. They're very accommodating.
Mm-hmm.
But I would find out and then maybe do a combination of that and bring some of your own stuff and have them allow you to bring some of your own food or ship some food ahead of time. In a case like that, again, I would be my own advocate first and foremost. But I would check with the cruise company to see if they can accommodate
Yeah.
you. But they're getting deliveries of like big, huge deliveries of food, so you don't know where that food was stored.
No, well, almost all large places use stainless steel.
No.
And their pots and pans, I had to get, totally different pots and pans.
No.
Mm.
Yeah, that sounds inconvenient for sure.
I hate it.
Yeah, I can't blame you there. Pat, you next?
Can you comment on travel insurance? And is that something that you automatically buy, like if you have your wheelchair damaged or your luggage lost, or is there some recommendation you make as far as that goes?
So, I have bought travel insurance before for a couple different things, but travel insurance doesn't cover my wheelchair. Ironically, you guys may not know this, but like they could send you home with a $50,000 brand new power wheelchair, and you can't go out and get insurance on it. There's not an insurance company in this country that will give you private insurance on a $50,000 wheelchair. I could buy a $2,000 like beat up car tomorrow and get insurance on it, but I can't get insurance on a mobility device. Isn't that crazy?
Really?
Yeah. So your travel insurance really covers your travel costs, not necessarily your mobility device or your mobility aid.
So when you mentioned your wheelchair being damaged on the airplane or when you found at the destination, who was responsible? The airline?
The airline. Yep. Yep. So one of our side companies that we created years ago is called the Global Repair Group. And we do wheelchair repairs for 29 airlines worldwide, right? We've been around for about almost 20 years, 15, 16 years. And that for-profit business feeds our nonprofit, which is great. And that is who would do it for you. So most of the airlines that say if I'm on United, they break my chair. I send a claim to the baggage service office, the BSO. The BSO calls Global Repair Group, and then Global Repair Group calls me. And then the airline doesn't have to worry about it anymore, and you deal directly with Global Repair Group. And they're really wonderful. They have great people, and the turnaround time is a lot quicker than it used to be before we were around. Really, before we came around, nobody knew how much damage was even happening or how much airlines were even spending on damage because it was never tracked, right? So.
Let's see.
Okay, are there any other questions for Craig? Because I have one for you, Greg.
Gordon's got one, it looks like.
Gordon, go ahead, sir.
Oh, you're still muted, Gordon.
Unmute.
There he goes.
So do you have do you have any recommendations for electric bikes? You've traveled a lot in Europe and there's more and more of those than in the United States. They're really coming on strong. A great way to get around for some people. Any suggestions or recommendations?
Well, depending on how your balance is, I would go with a trike. That's what my father-in-law just got. Now, he was diagnosed with MS in his 20s, right? And he's tough. He has managed his MS his whole life, and now he's 81, and he uses the sticks, and he has sometimes he has a walker to get around the house and stuff. And tell me the question again. I just lost my train of thought.
Electric bikes.
Electric bikes. So
Yeah.
he just got when they're at their place in Sarasota, he's got an electric trike. Right? Because I don't care how young you are, you can fall off a bike when you're 10 or when you're 80, right? But when you fall off a bike when you're 80, you get damaged a lot more, right? So depending on your balance and how much you actually ride a bike, you might want to think about getting a trike because you don't have to worry about the balance, and they work really well.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Craig, I have a friend who is doing a 20-mile bike ride today on a trike for the exact same reasons. And she had major back surgery just a year ago. It's just amazing. She just was intent on continuing her training. And it's just a tremendous story.
Is that just a straight bike ride or an electric bike?
It's just a straight bike.
Oh, wow. That's even more impressive. You know, what I love about the electric bikes is it's getting a lot more people back into exercise.
Right.
Right.
She
Where you
said
would have
that
stopped.
it was costing $7,000 to $8,000 for an electric bike, and she wasn't ready to put that out. I don't know if it's true or not, but
Yeah.
okay.
All right,
Greg,
Bill.
I have a question for you. I've been taking notes like crazy. You mentioned, I think, at the very beginning that if somebody wanted to get in touch with you directly,
Yep.
how would they do that?
I'll give you my email and I'll give you my phone number.
Okay.
So in fact, should I put it in the chat or do you want me to just say it?
Put it in the chat, and then it's in the.
Yeah, put it in the chat, be great.
Chat. All right.
But if you get 6 phone calls, I mean, it's
That's okay. If
All
I don't
right.
answer, that means I'm not available, but I will certainly call you back.
Well,
And
I
I'm
will
not
tell
kidding.
you,
I will help you guys out.
your trip to Pigeon Forge will be wonderful.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Bill, I think Marlene's got a question.
And then there's a couple of questions in the chat here that I'll answer as well. Go ahead,
Okay,
Marlene.
Marlene, go ahead.
Craig, thank you so much. That's so inspiring. Gosh. What was the process you went through accepting what happened to you? You know, when you had bad days, as we all, getting through all that. Can you help with that?
That's a big question for sure. When it first happened, my mindset was I need to be strong for everybody else. That was what I remember the most. I need to be strong for my family and my friends, and I used humor a lot. I'm kind of a jokester, so I used humor a lot to help with that. I buried a lot of the anger for 6 or 7 years until I had to deal with it, and I went and talked to somebody, and I still have some anger issues, to be honest with you, and it's mostly over lack of control. And I know some of you guys probably know what that feels like. Most people don't even approach that feeling of loss of independence until they get into their 70s and 80s. I experienced that in my early 20s, right? So that was a profound thing for me, but I kind of experienced it already. I think when I lose more of my independence, as the older I get, I think I'll be able to deal with it a little better. But I've also always been a very positive person. I have a positive attitude, kind of try to see the bright side behind everything. But I'm not going to lie, it was tough. The first couple of years were really tough. Just learning to do everything again and learning to change your mindset from I can't to, yeah, let's go try that. And I was strong for my friends and family. And then when I came home, they were strong for me. So every time they said, oh, let's go try this, I'd be like, I can't do that. I'm in a wheelchair. let's go. You're coming with us. And they drag me and they take me and they prove that I could do these things, so that really helped a lot. Having them in my corner was really good for me. But it's still something I have to work on all the time. Positive attitude is not a today or tomorrow or next week thing. It's an everyday thing. And I still get dragged down sometimes by little things. But it's, again, for me, it's that loss of control, because I've worked for 30 years to have some semblance of control over my life, even though we really don't have control over our lives. I get that. But maybe not control, just to make my life easier being in a wheelchair, if that makes sense. Right? It's how I handle being in a wheelchair. But I will tell you, like I said early on, I'm not interested in the walking part again. If I could get bathroom stuff back to normal, that's what most people in wheelchairs will tell you. Like, if I could, do the bathroom stuff like everybody else, I wouldn't care if I ever walked again. And honestly, I wouldn't, because I have a really great life. I ski. Up until I moved to Tennessee, I was skiing 80 days a year since my injury, right? I taught people how to ski. I have a really high quality of life. So that helps keep me going. And the other thing I will tell you, Marlene, and this sometimes comes off the wrong way, but there are a lot of other people in this world that are walking around that have a lot bigger problems than I do. And that helps me get by every day too. I'm not the only one going through stuff. I might be the only one going through what I'm going through. But everybody's got a story. Everybody's got something. Everybody's got a challenge, an issue, that they deal with in life, and they come at different times. But I know that I'm not alone in this fight.
Very good. Lisa, you had a question in chat about a service dog.
Oh, so I did have a service animal a long time ago. I'm seeing that now. So her name was Mohawkie. She was a 105-pound Newfoundland Akita mix, big, beautiful black dog. She looked like a bear. That's one of her nicknames, was Bear. And she had, the short hair and the curly tail and the small jowls of the Akita, so she didn't drool like a Newfie. But she was all Newfie temperament. She was an amazing dog. At first, we just used her to help educate people. I had a patch that said, "Ask to pet me, I'm friendly." Well, that was a mistake, because then everybody wanted to pet her anyways. Right. But she helped me with a few different things, right? So we taught her to sit next to me so I could push up on her shoulders to get back in my chair. We shopped. She would carry saddlebags, so she would carry groceries. And when we traveled, she carried her own food and her own water bowl. And then the first thing we taught her to do, because she was a big dog, is we built her a custom harness, and we taught her how to pull me. All right. So more like a carting animal. So I will be honest, I didn't necessarily need a service animal, and we did use her for a lot of education purposes, because we published a couple travel guides for people with disabilities, adventure travel. And I used to speak at disability expos and, in exchange for a booth to sell our books and all that stuff. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Steve, you had a question.
Bill, are you going to take a break or not?
We're going to take a break after this question.
Okay.
Steve? Hello, Steve?
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, I had a question for Craig. I was just curious if, Craig, do you suffer from neuropathy or any other kind of pain since you had your injury?
No, I'm very lucky, to be honest with you, Steve. I am a complete injury, so I don't have nerve pain. I don't have muscle spasms. I don't have back pain. I am not living every day in any pain. I am extremely lucky. But I am fully paralyzed from the waist down, so I don't move my legs. I can't feel my legs. But no, I'm not in any pain. I'm extremely blessed in that area.
Well, your talk was inspirational. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate that.
Okay, it's almost break time. And Steve, sensational talk.
Craig.
And I appreciate that, but we are going to take a break. And Steve, you're welcome to join us if you want to at the end. after the
I'm
break.
actually, so my wife and I are hitting the road here in a few minutes. We're going
All
down
right.
to
Well, we
Knoxville.
appreciate your time, and it was wonderful. And anyway, folks who are going to be here, I've got 307s. We're going to meet here again, take a 5-minute break, stand up, walk around, stretch your legs, get some water. Anyway, and Steve, again, have a great trip. And it certainly was very inspirational.
Bill, his name's Craig.
Craig, I'm sorry.
It's all good. That's
And
all good, Bill.
Craig, I'd like to personally thank you. I'm so glad that
Craig.
Stan put us in touch, and
Well, make sure you call Stan and tell him how awesome I was.
Well,
Remember,
I'll
go
get back to my
Vols.
in-laws eventually.
Well,
Go
he's in
Vols.
Hawaii now, so
I
maybe
know he is.
maybe
I'm
he
friends
could
with
have
him on
used-
Facebook. I see his pictures.
maybe he could have used your tips for getting
Yeah.
home. So
Fabulous talk, Craig. Fabulous
All right,
talk.
Thank you.
Craig.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you.
for the opportunity. And I was just so happy to see all those hands went up when I asked how many people were traveling. Don't stop traveling. It's so much fun. I love it.
true.
All right, we're taking a break.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye.
You take care. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Craig.